enough bedrooms to go around. But whenever Crew 1 departs and returns, now scheduled for April 28th, they will have bedrooms for everybody.
And this is pretty cool that Victor is the one getting everybody, or getting the station ready for Crew 2 to arrive, because he flew on Crew 1 about 6 months ago. And this is actually his first trip to space and first trip on the International Space Station. So I'm sure that he is super excited to be able to get the space station set up for Crew 2's arrival and welcome the Crew 2 crew.
That's right. He's been lucky enough to have his own bedroom. I think they might have done rock, paper, scissors. I'm not exactly sure how they had it, but Commander Mike Hopkins actually has been sleeping in Crewdragon Resilience during his stay aboard the International Space Station. Dragon Resilience and Crewdragon Endeavor will be sleep stations for some of the crew that are coming up now. I believe Hopkins will continue to sleep in Crewdragon Resilience, and I'm not sure who's going to do the rock, paper, scissors or whatever game they were playing earlier, the one from Thomas' childhood. That was so fun to find out. But they'll probably play a game to see who's going to sleep in Endeavor for the time being. In the meantime, Victor Glover continues to set up the station, and that'll be ready again for the Crew 2 astronauts whenever Crew 1 departs. You don't really lift weights in zero gravity, so it sort of simulates that. It does get up to pretty intense resistance, you know, hundreds of pounds kinds of resistance. They also have a stationary bicycle and a treadmill.
So they do get to work out in space.
They get to, and they have to. Yeah, that
Right.
actually maintain their muscle and bone density when in space. If they were to just leave it alone, you would see some deterioration in both of those. But they found out that exercising regularly, they give them about 2.5 hours every day by doing a combination of resistive exercise and aerobic exercise. It really helps to maintain that bone and muscle mass when they're in space for that long.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're looking at on your screen is, on your left-hand screen, a beautiful view of Earth. And on your right-hand screen is Victor, whom looks like he is upside down in the view, but there is no upside down or right side up in space. So he's there preparing for the Crew 2's arrival. What he's working on right now is getting one of the bedrooms ready. And he's working with the team on the ground. They are assisting him with this preparation.
The view on the left is a view of the Mediterranean Sea. The International Space Station flying about 262 statute miles right over it on a southeasterly trajectory, about to head over Egypt. That's what you see in the distance there. Now, the crew themselves have a pretty packed work day today. There's it's generally like that. Just ahead of really every day is crammed to about 5-minute increments, planned way in advance for all of the crew to perform their various experiments. As you see now, Victor Glover working on the install of the CASA, or the new bedroom of the International Space Station. In the meantime, 2 other astronauts, Commander Shannon Walker and Soichi Noguchi of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, are both exercising. Shannon Walker on the stationary bicycle, and Soichi Noguchi on the advanced resistive exercise device doing some weightlifting.
We do have a couple minutes before the crew on Crewdragon begins their meal. So we'll take some of your questions. Again, if you do have any questions, please use the hashtag LaunchAmerica. And we have a question here. Will Crew 2 have to sleep in the Crew 2 capsule?
The answer is yes, for one of the crew. So when Crew 2 arrives, they're going to bring the station population up to a whopping 11. Luckily, it will only be like that for a couple of days. There are currently 6 installed bedrooms on the International Space Station. You just saw...
from Columbus, I've got the 6-inch long 3/16 ball tip.
We are privatizing the loop.
Is going to make this possible.
Surgeon on private channel.
Copy this.
Yeah, in that communication, they were kind of overlapping there, but one was from Victor Glover, who is installing that 5th bedroom that I was talking about, our 7th bedroom, once because in regular crew rotation flights, so for about 6 months at a time, there's going to be 7 crew on board the International Space Station, 4 on a commercial vehicle, in this case Dragon, and then 3 on the Russian Soyuz. That is on the other end of the International Space Station, but there's accommodations for all 7 now on board. So during that couple days handover where there's 11 on board, everyone's going to have to find a different room to sleep in. So you'll have someone in the Crewdragon Resilience, someone in Crewdragon Endeavor, and then others will find different areas around the International Space Station. At nighttime, they do turn the lights down. They have emergency lighting just in case there was some event that were to happen, so they could find their way to the next, to a milestone or find the way around station. But really, I mean, you can strap yourself to literally any wall with a sleeping bag and call it a bedroom. It's actually nice.
And now that the crew has started their meal, let's take a look ahead to our upcoming milestones. At 5:40 a.m. Pacific Time, or 12:40 UTC, Mission Control will shift change, and that is necessary because this is a 24-hour flight, so we want to make sure that our crew in Mission Control gets some sleep and some rest. That is very important for these critical missions, so we will have a shift change. Then at 4:55 a.m. Pacific Time, will be the first opportunity for the crew to talk to all of you, the viewers. That'll be pretty exciting to hear from the crew on board Dragon. At 9:25 a.m. Pacific Time will be dinner time for the crew. And from there, a couple hours later, they will be going to sleep at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, or 1800 GMT. And hopefully be able to get a good 8 hours of rest. And during their sleep period, we are going to be bringing you a recap of today's highlights and taking a closer look at the careers of each of our crew members.
Over the last 20 years, crews aboard the space station have completed over 3,000 scientific and educational experiments, and Crew 2 is prepared to add to that growing number. Once Crew 2 arrives at the space station, they'll spend the next 6 months working in our orbital laboratory. Having 7 crew members on board, with 5 of those on the U.S. side compared to the 3 we've had for years, significantly expands the amount of research that can be conducted.
Not only will the crew be contributing to hundreds of experiments, they'll also be bringing some with them on Crewdragon. Resupply hardware for the vascular aging study is one of those experiments. This investigation is part of a series of studies from the Canadian Space Agency looking at the effects of weightlessness on astronauts' blood vessels and hearts. Vascular aging hones in on issues known to pose risks to astronauts' health, like radiation and insulation resistance, a precursor to type 2 diabetes. Studying the responses of the cardiovascular system in space better equips us to understand how our arteries age here on Earth.
Also launching aboard Crewdragon is hardware for an experiment called Celestial Immunity. It builds on earlier studies to evaluate how gravity affects our immune response. It uses cells from both elderly and younger adult donors to study possible age-associated effects. The investigation could uncover novel immune pathways useful for the development of new vaccines and drugs to prevent and treat existing and emerging human diseases.
including hardware to support new science onboard station, Crewdragon is carrying more than 500 pounds of cargo today. This also includes crew supplies like clothing and shoes, cameras, lights, and spare parts and tools for spacewalking, the station's exercise devices, and life support hardware on station.
And once Dragon is ready to come home, the teams will pack several hundred pounds of cargo inside the capsule to return to teams on Earth. When Crew 1 returns as early as next week, they'll be carrying more than 260 pounds of science samples for researchers back on Earth to analyze from more than a dozen research projects. They'll also bring any old or failed parts from the station systems, giving technicians on the ground a chance to analyze hardware up close and potentially refurbish and refly parts to the station. So for the latest on some of the activities happening on board the International Space Station now, in fact, the crew is undergoing a number of different things as they're just starting their day on board. Let's head over to Courtney in Houston for the latest. Courtney?
Yep, thanks, Gary. As you guys just mentioned, the crew is awake aboard the station, preparing to welcome the Crew 2 astronauts tomorrow. On docking day, NASA's Victor Glover will be primed for monitoring Dragon for its final approach and will take the lead on hatch operations. And back here in Mission Control Houston, the Orbit 1 team is still on console, being led by Flight Director Paul Kanya. The flight controllers are in the middle of a shift handover, so Flight Director Adi Boulos will be leading the next shift of flight controllers. Several hours before crew boarded Dragon, the space station did their own go-no-go poll. There are several key systems we have to ensure are functioning properly before NASA can give their go for launch. And everything is still looking good on the station side for Dragon's arrival, so let's head back to Hawthorne for the latest on what's next for Dragon.
All right, over the next 22 hours, Dragon will execute a series of burns, which will gradually raise its orbit to align more closely with the station. We've completed the first of our 5 major burns, the phase burn, that will bring the spacecraft close to station before we begin final approach maneuvers.
The next burn, which is based on what our orbital data shows us, is the boost burn, which raises Dragon's orbit until its orbit reaches an altitude just 10 kilometers lower than the space station. Followed soon after by the close co-elliptic burn to place Dragon on an orbit roughly co-elliptic with the space station. Now this means that the crew will be about 10 kilometers lower than the station during their entire orbit around the Earth. The fourth maneuver is the transfer burn, where we're raising Dragon's apogee, or highest point of its orbit, to just 2.5 kilometers below station. Then we round everything out with a final co-elliptic burn to once again maintain a constant orbit beneath station, this time just 2.5 kilometers below.
Then we'll get into the approach initiation and final stages of Dragon's rendezvous with the space station. This is also when we start integrated operations between the Dragon control team here in Hawthorne and the space station flight controllers in Mission Control Houston. The teams will transition to integrated operations roughly 45 minutes prior to approach initiation. During the approach, SpaceX flight controllers will work in tandem with the NASA team in Houston to activate and test out a number of systems on Dragon, including bidirectional communications with the station using the C2V2 system, which stands for Common Communications for Visiting Vehicles, and sets up a data stream from Dragon to the station, giving another path for Dragon telemetry to come to the ground and giving an additional command capability to astronauts aboard the station. They'll also maneuver Dragon to the proper attitude and initialize the navigation sensors used for the methodical approach to the station.
Tomorrow at approximately 12:40 a.m. Pacific Time, or 7:40 GMT, Draco thrusters on Dragon will fire for the approach initiation burn when Dragon is about 2.5 kilometers below station and just about 7 kilometers behind it. This will swing Dragon up until it's about 400 meters directly below the station. This maneuver will also move Dragon inside one of the 2 safety zones around the station that requires a set of go-no-go pulls with the different control teams. The first zone is called the approach ellipsoid, which is a...
So the one which you see currently is the actual path with which the capsule of SpaceX rocket is going to come in. I mean, the crew capsule for Falcon 9's crew is going to follow this path. As you can see, there is first a phase burn. After that, there is a boost burn. After that comes the co-elliptic burn. And then there happens a transfer burn which has a range of 20 to 80 kilometer, and then there is a final co-elliptic burn Okay, so that's about 20 to 80 kilometers, and next to that is a approach initiation, which is for about a 7 kilometer distance. After that comes the waypoint, which is the most critical part of the entire thing, because it is on a particular small part or distance which is up about 400 meters. So the entire mission stays on the waypoint thing because it's the most critical part of the entire mission. As you can see, there are narrators, and this is the crew of the SpaceX team, which is actually observing the mission currently, and everything has been observed very closely. And thanks to them, that because of them, the mission is actually alive, and because of the efforts of these, actually these launches have been able to get some amount of success. So after that, let's hope for this mission as well to get successful. We hope for the best for this particular mission as well, and as we are going to be with you every time for these launches, so you should also actually support us by actually subscribing to us and following us on all these social media platforms. What happens is we try to provide as much as value as possible from our side, but if there is no return from the other side, then it becomes worthless for us to actually do the efforts. So now it's your take to decide about the same, to think about the same, and to take action accordingly. With that, let's hope for the best, that the mission becomes a success once more, and we are able to get the joys from it.
Only for 4 orbits, or about 6 hours instead of 24 hours.
Dragon's move from waypoint 0 to waypoint 1 will swing it up and out in front of the station, pausing at a distance of approximately 220 meters. At this point, it will be on what we call the docking axis, which essentially...
So the schematic which you are currently seeing is very important, and not most of people would understand it. It actually explains about the inner details about the entire launch. For example, as I told previously about the waypoint, which is about 400 meters, and after that there is a swift turn over here on the waypoint 1. The waypoint 1 is about a distance of 220 meters over here, and then there is a smaller waypoint which is of 20 meters. Both of them are actually very crucial, and if we miss them, then it's a super massive threat to the entire crew, because the docking is very essential and it should happen at the right times at the right place, and there is no mistake expected in any of these procedures. So as soon as we complete the waypoint 1, then initiates the waypoint 2, which is of a 20-meter distance, which is, I guess, the most crucial part in the entire mission, because at this stage no mistake is expected. Nothing to be going wrong would be expected over here, and it's the most crucial part for the same reason.
And hatch opening, which is currently timelined to come about 2 hours following docking.
So lots of action still to cover over the next 22 hours, so stay with us as we continue our live coverage of NASA and SpaceX's Crew 2 mission to the International Space Station.
So now let's give a very wise thought to what we are actually doing. The intention of starting all of this was to get some results out of it, but the thing which I'm currently seeing is not at all worth it, because there are no actual results from the same. There are viewers, there is an audience which is viewing it, but it's rare, especially on such type of missions, whereas there is so many people who are doing it. What that means is that for you to actually survive in this continuously competitive race, you will have to do something very different. And I completely agree with the point now, because I have done it for my previous things, and that has been the only thing which gave me enough results. So there needs to be something very unique this time as well. What would that be, that thing which will grab the audience towards our content piece itself, without actually letting them to go anywhere else. So that's very crucial and that's difficult as well, but we will have to think about a way to get this done very wisely. There should not be a thing that I will actually go on wasting on my energy, my resources on this, and it won't give me results. That's not at all done. There needs to be a smarter option, a smarter way out of this entire procedure, and that's what we will need to think about. For example, there is the James Watt telescope, which is the somewhat a pretty good telescope in itself, and this particular telescope is what is being managed by Rubain. So what means is that he is actually doing something really unique, and that's a suggestion from a very good guy who is pretty smart himself. So that's James. I don't recollect the name actually. Let me quickly search about it. It's James Webb Space Telescope, and I'm sure that there should be some page about it on Instagram. So it's JW, right? So it's James Webb Space Telescope, and then we will search about it on Instagram. Now what will this do is it will suggest all those places, all those pages which are by the same name, and then we could decide which of these. Yes. No. No. This is not the one which is official. It is surely not official because it has already got verified. So this one is not the one. And if there is one which is being verified, then what is this guy doing over here? Okay, I guess this is the one. Yes, maybe this is the one which is not official, but it is the one which has been made, and it's going pretty good in itself. Entirely looking at our particular thing that we are completely messing with it, rather than they who are doing it great. Why does it take almost 24 hours to get to space station when Soyuz only takes about 6? Oh wow, that's a damn good question. A brilliant one. So that actually depends on the efficiency of both of these rockets. Some have got better efficiency and most others are not. See, the way both of them are operating is completely different. Soyuz operates in a completely different way than the way that this particular does. And this is very strange that she has, for the first time maybe, kept a story for us, her profile. Break the chain, and that was the session, right? So let's get to the story, and then there is this thing. Looking to build wealth. Either way, I recommend you to follow build wealth. I'm pretty not interested in this particular thing. This is one which maybe I will check out. And what is going on over here? And it looks like what are you doing with the screen? What are you doing with the screen also? The art of negotiation. 12-minute up. So these are pieces of content which are very unique to different users. The playbacks are so few that that's astonishing for me. That's really strange. I mean, and that's true as well because the amount of efforts that we are adding is good, but the competitiveness in the entire market which we are currently going through is really high. And what that means is that we will constantly have to do something different from what the entire community of these folks is doing. Now, doing that is not at all easy, and especially in a place where there are very good replicators who have got plenty lot of time. It's difficult because these guys have got the time, the energy, all of it to actually compete us. And if that's the case, then that's not going to help. And yeah, we are waiting for other members as well, listening to the entire stream. And maybe I personally don't like this, but I enjoy earning from it. Yes, that's true. And the reason I'm seeming to be very, very weird in this way is simple, that is nobody is going to care or even view this particular piece of content. Even YT has understood now that the channel has stopped itself, and till the day I actually don't become consistent with these types of views, it is not possible for me to actually get content pieces to be ranked in this match.
We're ready.
This is a
Okay, copy. Gotta privatize the channel. Next call will be from the surgeon on Dragon to Ground.
All right, so we won't hear Dragon to Ground communications to the Crew 2 astronauts on board Dragon Endeavour, Crewdragon Endeavour, for a while. That you just heard that Dragon to Ground line that we're just hearing with the Quindar in front of it. That's the communications from here in Hawthorne. That was the core, Chad Healy talking with Shane Kimbrough, the commander of Crew 2. That line is going to be privatized for a while and give the crew an option to talk to a medical officer here on the ground about how they're feeling. You know, do they have a headache, or do they feel dizzy or fatigued, or, you know, maybe zero G has done something to them. That'll be their time to do that on a private channel again, and to make sure that they're ready for the next couple of milestones, which will be crew meal and crew sleep. You know, whether or not they're going to need medication in that is their time to do so over a private channel.
Yeah, and there will be several check-ins for them with their flight surgeons, and they each have their own flight surgeon dedicated to each crew member, and that helps make sure that they are healthy throughout their entire mission. Having those milestones or set check-ins ensures that they are always keeping updated with whatever the crew is feeling throughout the mission.
That's right. Let's take another social question while we're waiting, and keep sending them in. These are great coming in from our social media channels. We're using the hashtag #LaunchAmerica, so if you have a question, please make sure to use that hashtag. This next one comes from Arlen, who's asking, what are the objectives of the astronauts on this mission? Now, I can speak from the International Space Station side, but what about this part of the mission, Jesse, on board Crew 2 Dragon?
Their objectives are to get to the space station safely. They do have a few things that they are doing on board. They will prepare for sleep and their meals, but for the most part, they're pretty much cruising through this mission for the next 22 more hours left on the coast phase to the International Space Station.
That's right. And once they get to the International Space Station, that mission
we can
is
say that the
science.
internal
That's
energy of
really what they're
any
going to be dedicating their
substance
time
is the
to.
total
Also,
energy
maintenance
of
and
all
upgrades
of its
aboard the
atoms and
International Space
molecules,
Station. They have a
and it
lot
is
of
necessary
scientific
to understand this
investigations
lesson.
to get
So what
through,
happens is,
whether
whenever
it's
these launches take
biomedical
place, it is
sciences
always
or
about
Earth
curiosity,
observations. We
and
did talk
especially
about a couple
the
of those
personal
experiments
level
now
of
being
branding
just
which
past Earth
these
Day.
types of
There are a
brands
couple
create
of
for
payloads
themselves.
on board the
Maybe
International
they are
Space Station
personal, maybe
looking
they are
down at the
individuals,
Earth. It's a
but
great
they are
vantage point.
extremely
Covers about
efficient at doing it.
85%
Maybe
of the
they don't
landmass
even
of
care about doing
Earth
it, but there
and
are
more than
agencies, there
90%
are
of the
people who are
population
actually managing
of
this stuff
Earth
out
as
there.
it makes its
And
way
then there is this
around
entire
the
game
Earth
of
16
glamorizing this
times a day.
particular
Some
stuff,
pretty good
and it
coverage
is
there,
a
so you can get
thing which
a lot of
must
good
be
data.
glamorized,
But yeah, that'll
especially
be
when the actions
their
of a
primary
particular
job
person
is scientific
are
experiments on
great.
board.
And that's what
Yeah,
I'm
and just
talking about
something to
killing.
note,
But the
they are
problem over
bringing
here, which
science
I
experiments
have
up with
observed a
them on
lot of
Crew
times,
Dragon.
and the
And
sad truth
again,
about this
on Demo
entire
2,
thing
when
is
we
that there is
first
only a
did the
single person who
demonstration
is
of
doing
this
this thing.
Crew
There
Dragon
is only a
flight, there
single
were a lot
person
of
whom we
tests
can
that
regard
Bob
as doing
and Doug
something really,
had to
really
run
different and
throughout
really, really great for
their
the
flight
society.
and
And
throughout
that's the
their
drawback.
coast phase
We
to
could
the
not
station.
be
But this isn't a
growing as a
demonstration
big,
anymore.
massive
They're
civilization.
basically
We
getting
will
to
not be
cruise
able
and
to
get to
grow on a
ride
single
all the way to the
Elon. We
station.
will
That's right,
require
and
thousands
that's
of
what
them,
that was. It
maybe
was a
even
demonstration
millions
to
of them in
demonstrate the
future. Because
capabilities
if there are
of the
not
Crew
such
Dragon
Elons
should they be
built
needed, and
in
that
each
was
and
their
every part of
objective
the
as
entire
the
world,
test pilots
then
for
that's
that
going to
test
be a
mission.
problem.
They
We
checked it
cannot
out.
rely
Everything
on a
looks good.
single
A lot of
Elon.
that was
Trust to that
manually
word. networks,
flying
we will
Dragon
require
and
a
mining
lot
with
of
the local
those,
vertical,
and
local
those will
horizon
actually shape this
attitude,
particular
just
world.
making sure that
A single
Dragon did
anon
all of
is
those,
great.
had all of those
However
capabilities to
powerful
do
a single
so in
anon
a
will be,
manual
we will
setting, literally
require
pressing
more of them.
buttons to
A
fire
single, though
Dragon's
powerful
surface section
than
Dracos,
thousands, will
maneuvering
not be
wherever they
able to
needed to go.
compete with
Bob and Doug
1,000.
checked that out,
It's
looked good,
obvious, right?
but the
At
idea
some
is that
stage,
it should
it
not be
becomes
needed on any
obvious that
nominal
even if you
flight,
are
no
single,
normal
but if you
flight
are super
to the
strong to
International
capture
Space Station.
1,000,
As we're
and
seeing
then
here
there are
today for
1,000
Crew 2,
in
a lot
front
of
of
this is
you which are
autonomous.
weaker than you, then too
Exactly.
those thousands will win because
Got another
they are
question
1,000
here.
brains
What does
collectively formed
rocket
together.
propellant do?
And these
Exactly.
1,000 brains together
That's a
formed
great
are
question.
even
Well,
greater
rocket
in mass
propellant
than your
basically
single
provides the
person's brain.
thrust needed
And I mean,
to
I'm just
lift
talking
the
about the mass,
vehicles
the
out
intellect,
of
the
the
actual
Earth's
capacity.
atmosphere and get
All
it
of
out
these
into
things
space,
also
and then
increase
also provide thrust
simultaneously.
in order to
So the thing is that
make
we
it
could not
to its
rely on a single alarm, and
targeted
we must
orbit,
not
and
rely.
then
What we
as
will
well
do
as the
is, what
thrust
we
on
need to
Dragon
do is,
will allow
we
it
need
to
to
get
create
to the
more of
space
such
station.
alarms. We simply cannot
And
rely
on
on a
Falcon
single
9,
alarm,
we
and
use
that's not
liquid
going to work
oxygen
for us
and rocket
anytime.
propellant, or RP1. And on Dragon, we use
The craziest thing which happened now, while I was speaking about these things in simple depth, is that the mic was on, but along with this, the Microsoft browser audio was also enabled. Now, what happened because of this is that both these audios came, and that's what I didn't want to. Now, I'm sure that it must have created a huge chaos, an utter chaos in that particular listening thing. So, be it so, let's listen to the original audio now.
And Chad, you guys are welcome on board with video.
And we copy, we'll get that in work.
So now we're back from that private medical conference. Again, the Dragon to ground line from the mission control operators here in Hawthorne to the crew aboard Dragon Endeavour was privatized for just a couple of minutes just to check in on the crew, see how they're feeling. Now we're back to a public channel, so we'll be able to hear those calls for the next couple of hours while they're awake, making their preparations really to make sure they're in a good configuration to eventually go to bed after a couple of meals and everything. They also said you have permission to come on board, so we may be seeing some views from inside Dragon soon, which is pretty cool. That they'll do that whenever they're either changing in and out of some of their clothes, so they doff their suits just a couple of what seems like hours ago, it might have been minutes ago, but now they're in more comfortable clothes, so now they have permission. We might be seeing some of those views very soon.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. I can't wait to see Crew 2 on board Dragon live. We'll get live views. That'll be pretty awesome. And as we were talking about earlier, the fuel on Dragon, again, the fuel is monomethyl hydrazine, which is hypergolic, meaning that it will spontaneously combust with certain oxides.
And Dragon SpaceX, we are back on board with video and have a question for you about cabin temperature when able.
Okay, welcome back on board, and we're ready for the cabin temp question.
And we're continuing to see cabin temperature rise here on the ground. If desired, we can set it to a cooler mixing mode to stop cabin temperature from rising, just based on your comfort.
Hey, right now everybody's comfortable, Chad. I know you guys want to do that one test, and so we're game for that if you want to do that as well.
Okay, we copy. I think we'll hold off on the test till tomorrow, but looking just to stabilize cabin temperature. If you guys are comfortable here, we'll try to maintain that temperature at this level.
Hey, thanks.
And regarding next steps, we're stepping into broadcast event prep here in a few minutes. When able, please access the floater cam.
So, Jesse, we just got a sneak peek of the inside of Crewdragon. You can see,
cool.
yeah, Commander Shane Kimbrough in his seat and pilot Megan McArthur in hers. But you saw some of the mission specialists. You saw Thomas Pesquet and Akihiko Hoshide off to the side there. Everybody's sort of moving around. Thermostat, though, is controlled from the ground, so they do have to make sure that they're comfortable. The cabin temperature being just the thermostat, really, on the inside, making sure they're comfortable for their sleep.
SpaceX for broadcast event.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I think we had a little transition and your call didn't get down, but we are stepping into broadcast event prep here. If or when able, please access the floater cam, and you can expect some cabin lights to be slightly adjusted. How copy?
Okay, we got the floater cam out, and I have the cabin mic as well if you want to give us some adjustments.
Okay, we copy. Additionally, looking for a status update on 4.012, specifically suit fan status.
Okay, good reminder, all the suits are dried out now, and the suit fan just came off. So 4.012 and 4.300 are complete.
And copy all. 4.012, 4.300 complete.
All right, so we have a real treat for you coming up here very shortly. We're going to hear directly from the crew on board Crewdragon. Some of the procedures you just heard there was to get the floater cam ready. This is a camera that's connected to a live feed, providing views down here to the ground, and we'll be able to share that with you here shortly.
I am so excited to see that. It was really cool to see the crew getting ready for this broadcast event coming up here to talk to all of you, the viewers watching right now. And we did get a little word of what we think the indicator, the zero-G indicator is, but let's see if we can spot it in the broadcast.
It was super hard to see up on ascent. I was like squinting trying to find it.
I know.
But I'm sure that'll be part of the tour. Another thing you heard from the Corps on the ground was to adjust the lighting, making sure we can see each of the astronauts as they make their way around. This will only be a couple of short minutes. They'll provide comments about maybe their experience on the liftoff on the Falcon 9. Each of these astronauts, this is their first time riding a Falcon 9, but they're not the first astronauts to do so. They may have had some hints from some of the former crew members. In fact, I'm sure Megan McArthur got a really good briefing from her husband, Bob Bankin, who flew on a Falcon 9 for the first time as part of the first crew to do so for Demo 2.
And it's really cool to hear all four of these crew members have actually flown before. So it's really cool to hear their comparison to their previous flights and then to Crewdragon. So hopefully they'll tell us a little bit about that as well.
That's right. Some of them flying multiple vehicles.
Right.
I know Thomas Pesquet only flew the Russian Soyuz, and Megan McArthur flew the shuttle. But Shane Kimbrough and Akihiko Hoshide both flew both shuttle and Soyuz. This is their third rocket to deliver them to space.
Getting to fly on all of them, huh? So again, if you're just now joining us, we do have a live broadcast on board Crewdragon with the Crew 2 crew coming up here shortly. They are currently getting ready for that broadcast, getting set up, getting the floater camera ready, lights ready. So stay tuned. This should be pretty exciting. I personally can't wait to hear from the crew.
Now, we'll be here and waiting eagerly, really, for that event. Some of the views from the inside and some comments from the four crew members. Now that they're past the operational phase, they'll be able to provide a little bit more comments on that. In the meantime, we've been loving some of your questions that have been coming in using the hashtag LaunchAmerica. We do have one more. Maybe we can even squeeze this one in. This one comes from Wolverine Mom, who's asking, hi, is there coffee available on the International Space Station? I know I would be asking the same question if I was on board. The answer is yes. It is instant coffee. So there's a couple of drink pouches that they have for different options. Coffee is one of them. They also have tea. I know they have lemonade. They have a couple of different options to sort of mix it up. I think a lot of the astronauts, for the most part, they do water, unless you're a regular coffee drinker. You might have coffee every morning, but they do have that option.
Got another one here. What happens if astronauts stay on the International Space Station for long durations?
That's a good question. This mission that Crew 2 is on right now to go to the International Space Station, they're going to stay for 6 months, and that is, by its category, by its definition, a long-duration mission. And this has been pretty regular since we've been having expeditions aboard the space station since November of 2000. So we've been doing this now for more than 20 years. And so some of the things you have to think about, I know one of the questions astronauts often get is, what's the difference between some of the short duration flights of the shuttle era, you're talking your 1 to 2 weeks, versus the 6-month stay? They say it's like a marathon versus a sprint. For shuttle, they were jam-packed with schedules, and they were doing just spacewalk after spacewalk a lot of the times. This one, you really have to spread it out. They do have very long days, but it's a different mental shift to get through some of those long days and long hours, and a variety of different tasks, including experiments, spacewalks, maintenance, what have you. But they also have to work out regularly, and that is a requirement for a long-duration mission to maintain that muscle mass and bone density.
Yeah, and that 6-month stay, it's a long duration stay, but it isn't the longest that an astronaut has been on the International Space Station, right? Do you know what the longest amount of days is?
Well, there's been on the Russian space station Mir, there's been crew that have stayed for well over a year. But just recently, we had a one-year mission that was designated as such with Scott Kelly and Mikhail Kornienko. It was part of a study to really test the limits, maybe not so much the limits, but the next step really beyond those 6 months increments to start doing one-year missions. We've seen that a couple of times afterwards, not quite the structure of the one-year mission that Scott Kelly embarked on, but you also had Christina Cook from NASA and Peggy Whitson. Some of these recent flyers of the International Space Station have stayed 200, 300 plus, and especially in the case of Christina Cook, really nearing that one-year mark, collecting a lot of good data coming up for station flights later in the next couple of years. There's going to be a protocol, an integrated protocol to start gathering more data and having more astronauts fly for 1 year or more at a time.
Wow, it's pretty incredible. We do have another question here. When does the International Space Station crew members go to sleep? And do they have strict sleeping time, or do they go to sleep when they want? Gary, you almost kind of touched on this, where they have jam-packed schedules. I think that's regardless of even the length of time, right? So they have specific schedules built in where they make sure that they do sleep. What are the schedules like?
That's right. So they try to minimize the shifting of the schedule and get them to bed and up at relatively the same time, unless there's maybe a dynamic operation. Maybe they have to shift, or maybe they have to do a weekend to support the rendezvous and capture of a cargo craft. But really, they have something called a post-sleep period and a pre-sleep period. So after their sleep, they have just some time to just sort of do whatever they want, and then they have the same thing at the back end of their workday. They have some time to settle down, to brush their teeth, get ready for bed, kind of thing. But they do have an 8-hour allotted sleep period. Now, that does not mean that it is a requirement for the astronaut to go to sleep at that time. A lot of them will stay up, maybe a little extra time, 30 minutes, an hour, and just kind of look out the window, because they don't necessarily get that time during the workday. They have very, very jam-packed schedules during the day, but it's not really a hard requirement to get 8 hours of sleep, although there is a lot of benefits to doing so.
Got another question here from 9-year-old future astronaut JJ. What does an astronaut do for entertainment besides looking out the window? Wow, you just said that too.
Yeah.
So, what do they do in that free time? You were mentioning pre and post sleep, and they have the option to kind of do whatever they want. So, what are their options out there?
Well, JJ, you sort of took away the big one, and that is looking out the window. That is a highly sought-after event. They have a cupola window on the International Space Station. It's a 7-bay window that looks right down at the Earth, and you could just sort of watch the Earth go by. A lot of the astronauts will spend some time taking photographs of the Earth or 4K imagery. We've seen some of that even recently. I think we posted a video yesterday about some of the more recent 4K footage we have of those Earth views. So they can take some pictures of the outside of the station. They also do some on the inside. But really, they have a lot of the same amenities that you and I would have. So they can call their family on their free time. They can request certain movies to be delivered up to them. They can even, now that the data stream up and down from the International Space Station has been improved, they can get live sporting events if they want to watch, you know, like a Formula One race or like a football game or something. I know Shane Kimbrough, that was one thing he requested quite often during his last flight. He's a big sports fan, so I'm sure he'll be doing that again on this flight.
Awesome. So they don't miss too much while they're out there.
It's surprising. Yeah, it's surprising. They do have a lot of connection with the ground. Sure, you're 250 miles above and you're in this spacecraft, but there is that constant connection to the ground, and you are close. You see the Earth right there. You can tune into sports games while you're traveling at 17,000 miles an hour. It's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
If you're just now joining us, we are waiting for the live broadcast of the Crew 2 crew on board Dragon. They're currently getting ready for that live broadcast. We're really excited to see the crew on board Dragon live and get to talk to all of you, the viewers watching. In the meantime, while we are waiting, Gary and I are taking more social questions, so please use the hashtag #LaunchAmerica, and we will read your questions and answer them. So we'll go to the next question. Can the crew listen to music while in space, or do they make a playlist for their trip?
That's a good question. They can listen to music in space. They do have some personal accommodations that they can bring up with them, so whether that's headphones, there is, I don't think it's normal for the astronauts to have music sort of projecting in the workspace. Everybody's sort of got off and doing their own thing, so you don't want to cause a disturbance to your crewmates. But even in your private quarters, you have the ability to stream music, whatever you want. We did get a little bit of spoilers ahead of time when they were on the ride out to the pad. A lot of the astronauts shared their playlist that they made when they were on that 20-minute ride from the Operations and Checkout Building in Kennedy Space Center to Pad 39A. A lot of songs that, you know, each car had its own set of songs. I forget exactly what they were. I think I remember Enter Sandman from Metallica and I remember Crazy Train from Ozzy Osbourne. Just like they picked, you know, pump-up songs on the way out, but they have that ability both here on the ground and, of course, during their time aboard the International Space Station.
And that kind of goes back to one of the other questions about entertainment. I'm sure listening to music is one of their ways of entertainment. We've got another question here. Do the astronauts have a microwave, or how do they heat their food? And greetings from Germany. Hello, Germany.
Yeah, great to see how many viewers we had from all over the world tuning into today's launch. It's not a microwave that they have on board the station, but it is a little food warmer. It's sort of the design of a briefcase. So you just open it up. There's some metal coils, and you could put either meals ready to eat in there, which is the more common thing. The rehydrated meals that they have aboard the station is rehydrated using a special system that delivers water into a packet, and it has to sit there and rehydrate. You can change the temperature on that water, so you can make the water a little bit warmer, and then when the food itself rehydrates, the food itself can be warm. So yes, and they can put, especially for the meals ready to eat packages, they can put those in the food warmer for varying amounts of time if they just want it a little bit warm or if they want it kind of warm. It's not necessarily an oven. It's not going to bake your food. It's not going to cook your food, but it will warm it.
Gary, I might just become an astronaut just so that I don't have to cook with these meals ready to eat. It sounds amazing. Got another question. Why does Crew 2 mission launched in nighttime, and why not in the daytime? So actually, it's not purposely during the nighttime or the daytime. It's actually very specific to the orbital mechanics, as you were mentioning earlier today, right?
That's right. And in fact, this is the third crewed launch that we've seen, right? You got the first test mission on Demo 2, and then this is the second crew rotation mission. We saw Crew 1 and now Crew 2. The previous two flights were during the daytime. So
Right.
it just happened to coincide with an orbit and with a trajectory that would allow it to rendezvous with the station in the right amount of time. Everything has to sort of line up. In fact, if you were watching today's coverage earlier, right before launch, they actually got a camera and they zoomed in on the International Space Station as it was passing overhead, and that's part of the trajectory to time that precisely with the moment that it's passing overhead on a trajectory that is predictable. So you can go ahead and rendezvous with the International Space Station. So it will vary from time to time. Sometimes it'll be like this, where it's going to be launching in the very early morning. Sometimes we'll get prime time. I know from a communications perspective, we want prime time.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool view of the International Space Station from the ground. And actually, this morning it was very early morning, so it was still a little bit dark when we lifted off. But after liftoff, you could kind of see the sunrise hitting the first stage and second stage during the mission prior to Crewdragon separating from the second stage. So that was actually a pretty cool view.
If you're just tuning in, we're waiting for a live broadcast from the Crewdragon Endeavour. We got a little bit of a preview before when the Dragon itself was passing over some ground stations. We did get some live views from inside the cabin, a sneak peek of what we're going to see. Everybody has been changed out or doffed their spacesuits that they used for the ascent portion of today's mission. So we're just standing by as the crew continues to get set up, and we wait for Dragon to head over a ground station so we can continue to get those views. And so we'll stand by for that event. In the meantime, answering your questions. These have been great so far, Jesse. If you want to continue to submit questions, we'll continue to answer them. Just use the hashtag #LaunchAmerica. So this one comes from Caveman TV, who's asking, what are the protocols for spacewalks when on the International Space Station, and how long can they be on a spacewalk for? So the protocols are very highly coordinated. They have detailed procedures for every moment of the spacewalk.
You want us to start this, or are we waiting on your go?
Waiting on our go. We're waiting for that floater cam to come live as we get over the ground station.
Gotcha, thanks.
All right, so it sounds like the crew themselves are ready for the event. We're just, again, waiting for that ground station to pass over so they can get some of those live views from Crewdragon. So we'll hopefully be seeing that momentarily. The last question was about the protocols and procedures for spacewalks on board the International Space Station.
Dragon SpaceX, we are live with the floater cam. At this time, we're ready for the sound sync test. Using the cabin mic, count verbally to 15 with your mouth visible to the camera.
Sound check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
Okay, we copy. Stand by for the cue to begin broadcast event.
Standing by.
Very cool, Gary. It sounds like they're pretty much ready for this live broadcast event. Just waiting for the cue, so that should be here shortly.
That's right. We'll get back to your questions as we come back, but we're going to stand by and eagerly await the start of today's event, get some views from the inside of the Dragon cabin.
Crewdragon SpaceX, you are go to begin the broadcast event.
Hello, everyone. Welcome on board Endeavour. We're a couple hours into the flight, making our second lap around the Earth. Right now, we're over kind of eastern. Hello, everyone. Welcome on board Endeavour. We're a couple hours into the flight, making our second lap around the Earth. Right now, we're over kind of eastern South Africa. So it's really great looking out our windows, and we get to see some pretty cool stuff up here. But we had an incredible launch. Hopefully you guys got to watch it this morning. Right as the sun was rising, we took off. We chased the sun pretty quickly and caught it up just a few minutes after we took off. That was pretty special to see the sunlight coming in shortly after liftoff. We're going to show you around the vehicle real quick, and hope you guys really enjoy it. And I'll pass it over to our pilot, Megan McArthur.
Hello, Earth. It's great to be back in space again after a few years for me. The ascent was incredible. The ride was really smooth. We couldn't have asked for anything better. There may have been some hooting and giggling up here while all that was going on. We hope you enjoyed the show as well. I'm kind of relearning. I'm like a baby bird here, relearning how to move around in microgravity. It feels really good, but it feels a little bit weird too. Fortunately, it's a nice small space that I can relearn to move around together. I'm going to hand it over to Thomas, who's going to show you around a little bit of what I up here.
Thanks, Megan. Hi, everyone. I'm Thomas, Mission Specialist. I'll be your tour guide today in the Crewdragon Endeavour capsule. Thanks for flying with us. Welcome on board. Our commander, Shane Kimbrough. Welcome your pilot, Megan McArthur. Also, and next will be Akihiko Hoshide. So as you see, it's pretty roomy. The ride up was fantastic. This is the hatch behind this. Of space, harsh temperature, bad environment, bad stuff. Inside, very comfy. We feel very well protected. Everything is great. If you get closer, you can get a view out the window, and I'll try to give you that if the cable is long enough. And this is what we get to see. Coming up on Madagascar, but it's cloudy. I don't think you get a good view. But we'll try to get pictures, and I can show you maybe the cargo area down there, because this vehicle is bringing people up to space, but also cargo. And if you follow me, and I'm going to flip and try not to make everybody sick, down there is where we have a little cargo. There's freezers. This is our suits, nicely packed. This is more cargo. We have our water landing equipment. And this is all nice and tidy. And behind those walls are a lot of other equipment that we need, clothes, food, and etc. So with that, now that you're familiar with the capsule, I'm going to hand you over to Akihiko Hoshide, Aki for short, from JAXA, and he's going to give you some more information.
Hello, Earthlings.
Oh. And it looks like we lost that live signal.
As well. One thing, this capsule looks just like our mock-up simulator in Hawthorne, except you can't do this because we're upside down, and this is actually the hatch that goes to the International Space Station. And once we dock, we're going to open this hatch and get on board and see our friends who are up there right now. Now we have a fifth crew member, and as you can see, Shane is holding him right now, but he can actually fly. It's a penguin that our boys chose, and his name is Gwyn. Welcome, Gwyn, to space.
That was really cool seeing Gwyn start flying after we hit 0G. Tomorrow, Aki talked about we're going to dock to the International Space Station. It's going to be around 5 a.m. Eastern Time in the U.S. Hope you guys can join us for that, but it's going to be great to on that forward port on the space station and join our friends there. Crew 1 is on board along with Expedition 65, a couple Russians, and Mark Vandehei. So we're looking forward to joining that crew and having a big time up there with 11 people on board. Megan, any closing words?
And I think we can just show folks kind of what our environment looks like up here, Shane. These are the displays that we use to monitor the spacecraft systems through all the different phases of flight. So we had displays up, of course, during ascent, and then we'll have some ability to monitor the docking sequence as well. All of the burns that will get us closer to the space station. We'll eventually be able to see different kinds of images of the space station on our screens as we get closer. And then, of course, once we contact the space station, we'll monitor the docking system mechanism using these displays as well. So it's pretty neat to see the touch screens and all the different facilities that they have. We can bring up different systems pages while we're working through the different activities. So those are something neat to see. Rather than the old-timey steam gauges, we have these pretty cool touch screens that we can use.
One thing I'll add before we sign off is Thomas noticed a little while ago, after we're getting out of our suits, he looked out the window when he saw our second stage pretty much flying in formation with us just underneath us, and that was very special. So we all rushed to the windows to look at that for a little while. So that was pretty cool. So we're enjoying our first day on orbit. So we got a lot more to go, and we're looking forward to it. Hope you guys enjoyed the little tour of our capsule. And we'll be in a much bigger environment tomorrow once we dock with the International Space Station. Have a great day. Take care. So long from Endeavour.
Well, thank you so much for sharing those views with us and giving us a glimpse into life on board Dragon and letting us meet Gwyn. Thank you again.
Some pretty cool live views of the Crew 2 crew giving us a tour.
And that terminates the broadcast event.
And we heard that conclusion of the live broadcast. Again, Crew 2 crew was giving us a tour on board Dragon, so that was pretty cool. And we got to meet Gwyn, the zero-G indicator. We were so curious to see what it was going to be, and it is a penguin that they named Gwyn.
We almost didn't get to see it, too. There was a pass over the ground station. We lost the feed for just a second, but then it came back, and we saw Gwyn flying in zero-G. It was pretty spectacular stuff. I also love when Thomas showed the window, and he's like, "Oh, I'm not sure if Madagascar is going to look good because there's a little bit of cloud coverage," but it looked absolutely gorgeous. I think everyone can be very jealous of those views that they're getting from Crewdragon Endeavour. They said they still have a long journey ahead of them, of course, but man, they're going to definitely soak in this journey while they have it.
Yeah, very, very cool. And again, if you're just now joining us, we have been following the Crew 2 crew all the way from the beginning, early this morning, from suit up at the ONC building to ingress of the Dragon vehicle. We had an on-time liftoff this morning at 5:45 a.m. Eastern Time. Our first stage came back to land for its second time on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You. We had a good Dragon separation from the second stage, and we just heard the crew mention that they actually were able to see the second stage from Crewdragon. So they all went to look out the window. That is incredible. Must have been an amazing, amazing view.
It's really cool to see the excitement from this crew. Absolutely spectacular. So after that, immediately after Dragon spacecraft separated from the Falcon 9, that's when it began what's called the activation and rendezvous phase of the mission. So during this phase, Dragon is configured for on-orbit operations. The phase begins after separation of Dragon from Falcon 9 and ends with the completion of the final co-elliptic burn. So our initial orbit today is 210 kilometers by 190 kilometers, with those values representing the apogee and the perigee of the orbit, or the highest and lowest points over the Earth. That means the orbit isn't a perfect circle, but more like a very slight ellipse.
Dragon has already executed one of the 5 burns, which will gradually raise its orbit to align more closely with the station. That first major burn was the phase burn and was performed at the first apogee of the initial orbit and raised Dragon's perigee to a higher altitude.
The next burn, which is based on our orbital data, is the boost burn, which raises Dragon's orbit until its orbit reaches an altitude just 10 kilometers lower than the space station. This is followed soon after by the closed co-elliptic burn to place Dragon on an orbit roughly co-elliptic with the space station. This means the crew will be about 10 kilometers lower than the station during their entire orbit around the Earth. The fourth maneuver is called the transfer burn, where we're raising Dragon's apogee, or the highest point in its orbit, to just 2.5 kilometers below the station. And then we round everything out with a final co-elliptic burn to once again maintain a constant orbit beneath the station, this time just 2.5 kilometers below it.
Then we'll get into the approach.
Dragon SpaceX, the floater cam is now off. You may now stow the floater cam, and cabin lighting will be returned to normal.
Copy, thanks. And can you go external on the cameras for a little while for us?
And a copy in work.
Just some communications with the core to the crew. They are putting away their floater camera, and they did ask for some privacy. That is what Megan was requesting, for them to turn off the internal cameras. Now, as Gary and I were talking through the burns for Dragon, next will be, or in our explanation, will be the approach initiation.
Dragon
and
SpaceX cameras are exterior only.
Copy, thanks.
And that is the confirmation for those internal cameras on Crewdragon being turned off, and they only have the external cameras now. So finally, in Dragon's approach will be the approach initiation and final stages of Dragon's rendezvous with the space station. This is also when we start the integrated operations between the Dragon control team here in Hawthorne and the space station flight controllers in Mission Control Houston. The teams will transition to integrated operations roughly 45 minutes prior to approach initiation. During the approach, SpaceX flight controllers will work in tandem with the NASA team in Houston to activate and test out a number of systems on Dragon, including bidirectional communication with the station using the C2V2 system, which stands for Common Communications for Visiting Vehicles, and sets up a data stream from Dragon to the station, giving another path for Dragon telemetry to come to the ground and giving an additional command capability to astronauts aboard the station. They'll also maneuver Dragon to proper attitude and initialize the navigation sensors used for the methodical approach to station.
So tomorrow at approximately 12:40 a.m. Pacific or 7:40 a.m. GMT, the Dragon thrusters on Dragon will fire for the approach initiation burn when Dragon is about 2.5 kilometers below the station and just about 7 kilometers behind it. This will swing Dragon up until it's about 400 meters directly below the station. This maneuver will also move Dragon inside one of 2 safety zones around the station that requires a set of go, no-go poles with the different control teams. The first zone is called the approach ellipsoid, which is an imaginary shape measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers, essentially a large 3-dimensional oval. Before Dragon is given permission to move inside the ellipsoid, referred to by the teams as the AE, it's configured to be on what is known as a 24-hour safe trajectory. This means that if Dragon lost all control to its thrusters, it would be at least 24 hours before the trajectory would move inside that approach ellipsoid.
Once Dragon arrives at 400 meters below station, it will be at what is known as Waypoint 0 and will be the first checkpoint during our approach. The vehicle can hold at 400 meters or continue on if all systems check out to approach to Waypoint 1. By this point, the teams will do a go-no-go pull for Dragon to move inside the keep-out sphere, another zone that consists of an imaginary sphere around the station with a radius of 200 meters. It's another chance to confirm all the guidance, navigation, and control systems are working correctly on Dragon before moving closer to the station, and carries a requirement similar to the AE that Dragon's orbital trajectory would not bring it inside that sphere if control was lost, but this time only for 4 orbits, or about 6 hours instead of 24 hours.
Dragon's move from Waypoint 0 to Waypoint 1 will swing it up and out in front of the station, pausing at a distance of approximately 220 meters. At this point, it will be on what we call the docking axis, which essentially means it's directly in front of the docking port. The crew is headed to the forward-most port on the International Space Station, the Node 2 forward port. That's where Dragon docked for both of our demonstration missions and where one of 2 international docking adapters is located. These were installed for new commercial spacecraft flights and any other future spacecraft that also use the International Docking Standard.
Once Dragon is only 20 meters away at waypoint 2, the spacecraft focuses on aligning its docking system with the docking adapter. Dragon will then fly in and make contact with the IDA, giving us what we call soft capture. The soft capture ring then retracts until sensors indicate it's time for hooks to drive in place to give us a hard capture and firmly secure Dragon to the station. Then it's time for leak checks and hatch opening, which is currently timelined to come about 2 hours following docking.
So we have a lot of action still to come, so stay with us as we follow Dragon carrying NASA's Crew 2 astronauts to the International Space Station.
Thanks, Gary. The crew is awake aboard the station now, getting ready to welcome the Crew 2 astronauts tomorrow. The crew on board the station was actually watching our coverage, watching the launch play out. Astronaut Victor Glover tweeted his tweet read, "Godspeed." Tomorrow on docking day, NASA's Victor Glover will be prime for monitoring Dragon for its final approach and will take the lead on hatch operations. Once the hatches are opened after Crew 2's arrival, aboard the station for the next few days. Station Commander Shannon Walker will give the new arrivals a safety briefing. They'll have a light day before heading to sleep early while the rest of the expedition